it's not an easy thing to get your masters back, you know, capital, contracts, like the whole nine. Like what was that process like for you?
Well, Caterpillar was an easy one for me to get. Some of them harder than others. Some of them were tied up into major label situations that I had previously been in from back in the day. For the most part, the people that I've done business with on an independent level have been pretty considerate of my desire to outright own, you know, stuff that they've had pretty much full control over in terms of the master since we did the deal, you know, which is what we both agreed on. So we definitely weren't sitting down coming from a place of grief or complaining or anything like that. Like, I never got to that spot mentally, you know, with the business. I know that that's kind of like a trend, but I've been blessed to be able to do some pretty good business with some pretty decent people in music. So it was just an easy transition. Most of the agreements that I signed, those labels had control over the master for like, I believe like 7 years or something like that. So after 7 years, you know, it just reopens the conversation of me taking over the ownership and moving forward, you know. Caterpillar was an easy one. It was an easy one. Shout out to Alan Grumblatt. He didn't trip on me at all. And you know, Reggie, it's just a process. It's a process, and each individual process is unique to the situation.
And what's the importance of ownership for you?
Huh?
What's the importance of ownership for you? For you know, a lot of people don't even know why they want their masters.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't know that when you come into the business and you play music for people and they're excited about it, or you upload something to the streaming platforms and you're doing numbers and that's getting the attention of the labels, prior to going in and signing whatever you're gonna sign with that label, I mean, you own that stuff. That's your intellectual property. You're the original owner of it. You know, they can't take that away from you. You have to give it to them. You know, you have to give that away. A lot of the stuff that I recorded from back in the day, I went and signed a deal and then recorded it, and they put up the money for me to record it. You know, so automatically through that process, I didn't have a full understanding of the importance of ownership like they did. You know what I mean? So after I built up my own audience, and I started realizing that I don't always have to rely on big labels to do things that I kind of learned how to do myself and wasn't really clearly able to tell them how to do it. Like, if you can't articulate who you are as an artist to the label, then what they'll do is they'll try to articulate who they think you are to the world. And a lot of times there's a disconnect there. So, and it takes a minute for us to become self-aware, you know? So like you said, Reggie, it took me into a Book of Ryan to have a full understanding of who I am as a person to be able to project that. So once I was able to do that, you know, I was pretty much off to the races. So throughout that process, I learned the importance of the master, the way that everything is paid out, the importance of ownership, you know, just the importance of building a brand in general. You know, first it was just about money, money, money for me, you know, like I never even thought about the revenue streams that were associated with just owning the master until I started to see how much money that was being made as opposed to how much money I was making in the process. You think about it, if all my life I'm poor and I go to the NBA and I sign a multi-million-dollar contract, shit. In contrast, I made it, you know, but in business, is it fair?
Right.
And generated. What am I in its totality, in its fullness, what am I bringing to the table? How much revenue am I generating?
Yeah.
How much of that do I deserve? And am I even in those conversations? Of course not in the beginning, but after a while, you become wiser. And then you figure out how to integrate yourself into those conversations. And you have a better understanding of how to place value on what it is that you are. A lot of times you can be having a conversation as an influential person and not be knowing how much that's worth. And then somebody can come in with a little bit more wisdom in you with a couple of dollars and put value on it and can put you in a position where they can collect off of it and give you what's left.
Mhm.
And what's left of that may be more than you had. So you look
Right.
at it like a come up.
You
And
know,
it's
technology's changed that too, right?
yes,
Because it used to be, you know, a master was kind of one and done, right? People bought the CD, they bought the vinyl, and after a while, those sales kind of like petered out. But with streaming now, you get paid on the master and the publishing side every time.
yes.
And so the revenue stream is much greater than it used to be. And, you know, to your point about ownership, a lot of times you want to own because you don't know how things are going to evolve, right? So it was records one day, and then it became streaming, and now you're in NFTs, which is, you know, kind of tangible on the digital side too. But the value that can be unlocked over time, none of us can predict. So the only thing you can do is control your ownership, so that when that time occurs, you can extract that value.
And that's what that's in anything. I've never
Yeah.
heard anybody being a part of something or having to give their life to something that somebody else has ownership of, and that person be happy in that situation. I don't care if it's a lease on a house, a lease on a car. It's just always easier when you can make decisions. And you can make decisions and do stuff, because it's hard to stay on the same page with people. You know, I went in partnerships with people, and sometimes you just grow in different directions, and that affects you. You know, same with divorce. Divorce is just one big disagreement in ownership. You know what I mean? Like, it's like two companies going in two different directions, and now you're trying to figure out who gets what. You know what I mean? Like, and oftentimes you can't agree on it. You got to find a mediator who's going to relegate things. You know what I mean? So when you own just whatever that you're a part of, it just cuts all of that out. You know, so whatever may come up. Back in the day, it was the label taking your master and putting it on soundtracks without having to talk to you, or putting it on like those late night shows. I mean, those late night infomercials where it'd be like a collage of a bunch of songs from back in the day. Just labels trying to figure out new ways to make money off something that they own. And I hate the idea or the thought of all of those great artists that made those songs just somewhere, just looking at that like somebody's collecting off of that. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm somewhere on my deathbed, and my children won't be able to reap the benefits of that, because back in the day when I signed my deal, I just signed what was standard in that moment. And things become standard in a moment when the people in the moment who are signing those pieces of paper don't have an idea of how to fully utilize their talent and get the most out of it. You know what I mean? Like, you just looking to your left and your right and saying, all right, well, he signed it, so it must be okay. You know what I
And
mean?
that's getting flipped now. I don't know. Have you heard about this Black Sheep lawsuit against UMG?
I heard about it.
They're suing them for $750 million, because back in the day, the way the recording agreements were was, you know, you got a royalty for the technology that they knew about back then. So CDs, records, vinyls, whatever it was. And for anything that they hadn't anticipated, they said, okay, we'll give you a 50-50 split of the net profits. And so what Black Sheep is saying,
the language in the contract said that?
that's what the language says. And most agreements, like, you know, before, like, say 2000, right? You know, before like people started thinking about streaming. And so what Black Sheep is saying is that UMG negotiated lower rates with Spotify in exchange for equity. So that equity really is for the music too.
Yeah.
And they should get a percentage of that equity. And if you like break it out, their equity stake in Spotify is worth roughly $750 million. Okay. So Black Sheep is saying they don't get all 750, but all the artists who had agreements like that should be able to chop that 750 up.
I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it. I mean, come on, man, hold him to the fire.
Yeah.
The fire. It's I think he has a good case.
Yeah.
He has a good case. I think you're gonna sign all those artists to a certain agreement, and then you knew at the point of things evolving that all of those acts that you had, you know, they may have been a little more stagnant in that moment than they were in previous years, but something to use as leverage to move forward in this new agreement that you're getting into that you didn't inform them about. I think it's something to be said there. I think it's a case there.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much as he's going for, but I mean, that's what you do, right? You shoot high.
Absolutely.
Shoot high and see what happens, because we're not gonna sit here and act like that they didn't contribute. And it's not something that Sony looked at and said to themselves that I can use this as one of the pieces of leverage, because you upload that shit to streaming platforms, people are streaming it, man. They're listening to it. You talking about classic records.
Absolutely.
Big time.
Like you talking about records that will never die.
Yeah.
Never die. We're not talking about just regular hip hop shit. It's not regular. This is that's greatness. You know what I mean? It's like
classic.
Yeah. So yeah, man, I'm rooting for him.
You know, I want to ask you, as we talk about ownership and valuing, and Reggie's value of something might be different than mine, and our sense of ownership and what we're going to do with it, you know, can be different. You know, when it came to something that we covered last year with, you know, the tensions within Slaughterhouse, how much was valuing that ownership really at the root of it?
Of the tension?
Yeah, I mean, of just what we watched play out last February.
You know, I'm gonna speak just from my standpoint. I don't want to speak for anybody else. But value of ownership in that moment was the most important thing to me, besides the brotherhood. So I had a vision, and a lot of my visions were rooted in being excited about the newfound ownership in that moment, which came from us asking for a release from the label Shady and being granted that release. So that was done. So we had it outright done. 25, 25, 25, 25. We hadn't been able to say that since the first E1 album, you know? So after all we had been through, Joe's success in the content space, his understanding of ownership, the value of it, his history of doing not just one deal, but many kinds of deals. He has experience with going and doing deals and negotiating something on the front end, taking that and moving forward and moving on to the next situation. We've done that plenty of times. We've also been in situations where we've been fortunate enough to find out what it feels like to reap the benefits of back end money. So we've seen it both ways. So now it's like, in this point in our careers, do we want to just do like a record deal? You know what I mean? We can talk about it. It's something to discuss. But knowing that you have options and talking through those options and figuring out what works best for everybody isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do when you have people involved that aren't communicating as well as others that are involved. We've had our most success as a group when we've been able to communicate through things. We've had many disagreements. There's never been a time where somebody wasn't having something with somebody.
Sure.
So this is not like Crooked's issue with Joe. This is not a new thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that hadn't been brought to the table before. Our last few conversations together as a unit to discuss business is when I personally felt like any issues should have been brought to the table. They were not.
And were those if I might ask, were those conversations you were speaking of the ones that the public watched in real time?
No. Okay. Those weren't conversations. That was just mess.
Mm.
Conversations I'm talking about were productive ones, where we're all sitting on a conference call talking about our next moves for Slaughterhouse.
Got you.
So those conversations put me in a certain mood, just in terms of the way that I'm looking at my brand and what my next moves are going to be. And we were having really in-depth discussions on, you know, like relaunching the brand, relaunching the site, relaunching the merch, a lot of other things to consider outside of just making the album. You know, where we going to record it at, who we going with, well, how do we feel about Glass House? Do we want to pursue getting that music from Shady? Do we want to just leave it there? You know, those kind of conversations. So when everything kind of like came to a head is when they went and put out the project, The Rise and Fall of Slaughterhouse. And that project basically was them making an announcement to the world that Slaughterhouse is over. And my reaction to that, to answer your question, my overall outlook on ownership and the importance of it played a huge role in why I reacted to it that way. That was one element. And the other element was just feeling betrayed, like the brotherhood being mishandled for whatever reason. You know what I mean? It happens. So when it happens on a public forum and it gets done in such a public, loud, whistle blow, pull the trigger type of way, you know, when you do stuff like that, it's just that there's going to be a reaction, you know. And
Yeah.
we're not going to always handle ourselves. I'm not necessarily proud of the way that I handled it. I'm working on being more in control of my emotions, but it's very hard to like treat this shit like it's just business, because it's not. Nothing that I do is just business. You know, anything that I do in the artistic space, I'm always gonna have an emotional investment in it. I think that's kind of like the same place that I pull from when I'm actually creating it, you know. So how can I not be attached to it? I haven't been able to separate myself from any music that I do.
Okay.
I always like it before I release it. I always like it before you like it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm attached to it before you get it. So that's why when you get it, if you criticize it, it's hard for me to just take that in stride. I'm automatically trying to figure out how to make you like it, how to get you to like it, because I want you to feel what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? I think it's amazing when artists have that gift to where they can just take it in stride, you know, have tough skin, nothing affects them. Everything just bounces off of them. I think that's an amazing characteristic to have. And I think you need that. And that's one of the things that I'm developing and I'm working on, you know what I mean? So, but I still look at the situation, how I look at the situation. Nothing's changed in terms of how I view. I still think that I'm still disappointed in Crook. You know, like I still just think that his actions and the way that he handled that was just not characteristic of what he's shown me over the years. So it was a letdown, and I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed and I felt let down. I feel like I understand the way that he feels in terms of like with Joe. I've never asked Crooked to feel differently about Joe. I've never done that with any of them. I can't tell you how to feel. I can't tell you how things should affect you. How you feel is how you feel. You tell me how you feel. And then my job as your friend, and a lot of times the mediator, I found myself in the spot as the mediator a lot of times. A lot of times my thing is just to be as fair and objective as possible. That's all I've ever tried to do. I've never taken any one side ever, you know. So, but just in terms of relationship, you know, me and Crook, well, my perception was me and Crook was closer than any of us. So I consider all of them friends, but me and Crook just talk more frequently, especially during the pandemic. So a lot of my reaction was just more of it was a personal reaction. It was being hurt on the personal side, you know. So